Some examples we see in the way he lived his life of how you and I can become more potent in our faith and have that thing that other people want. First thing that you need to understand if you want to become potent in your faith is you need to ask God to let you see people through his eyes. To see people as God sees them. And that's what Jesus did. It was easy for him. I mean, he's God, right? He's Emmanuel, God with us. So he would see people as God sees them. But he also allows you to do that. Let me tell you something. I experienced this in such a powerful way. When I finally began to accept Christ enough and say I wanted to live for him, that the scales began to come off my eyes and I began to see people the way God sees them. I was born and raised in the South. Y'all heard me say that. And there's some really awesome things that go with being born and raised in the South. And there's some things that if you were born and raised in the 60s, it wasn't such good things. One of those things is I grew up a very prejudiced person. Okay, some of you may have been in that same place. Some of you may be struggling with that same thing right now. I remember the time that God began to speak into my life and said, Kenny, you need to see those people the way I see them. Quit looking at color and look at what's inside. Quit looking at how they live their lifestyle and begin to see the people for who they can be. And I remember it just as distinctly as it was yesterday. I was driving from our house in Hiram and was going to work at Delta Airlines, and I come to a stop sign there in Douglasville, Georgia. And there's this little black guy that always run around there. And we called him Hercules because Hercules always wore these tank tops. He was all built up, and he'd wear a weight belt everywhere he went. And I think he was a little different. But, and he comes walking down the sidewalk, and I'm sitting here at the stop sign, and I see him, and he looks at me, and he gets all bowed up like this, And I thought, I'll get out of this truck and knock him. What do you think you're doing, Y'all, it was like God spoke into my heart and said, that's my child. Why would you have that kind of feeling toward him? From that day forward, God began to take that prejudice away from me. He began to take those scales off my eyes, and more importantly, began to take them off my heart. To begin to see people the way he sees them. Loving child of God with the potential to become everything that God wants them to be. And you can't have a faith that people want if there's things that prevent you from seeing people the way God sees them. You can't do it by yourself. You've got to ask God to take that away from you. Now, I don't know what your prejudice is, but the fact is that you're a human being and you're alive and you've got prejudices. And God can take them away. If you want to be a person who has a contagious faith, you have to begin to see people the way God sees them. Listen to this. It's a story from a Jewish doctor. It's a book called A Jewish Doctor Speaks Out. Why I Believe Jesus is the Jewish Messiah by Dr. Jack Sternberg. Here's what he writes. A woman with terminal breast cancer whom I was treating was in her early 30s with a husband and a young child whom she would soon leave widowed and motherless. Yet she seemed more concerned about my spiritual welfare in my knowing Jesus Christ than the fact that she was dying. She saw my lostness, my separation from God, as a greater tragedy than her own illness. She trusted this Jesus then and for eternity. God had allowed illness to ravage her, yet she still loved, worshiped, and followed him. She seemed confident about her future and genuinely concerned about mine. He writes, that overwhelmed me. That woman saw that doctor like Jesus sees him. He's a lost child. He's calling home. We have to ask God to let us see people the way he sees them. Here's another thing that we can learn from Jesus' life that will help us be a people who have a contagious faith. We need to increase the potency of our faith by talking about God to our friends. One of the things that we say, especially here in the South, is you never talk about religion or politics, right? It's too controversial. Well, get over it. You just need to tell people about God. And sometimes you need to use words to do that. Sometimes you just need to live it out in your life. And that's what our theme, listen to this from James 5:16. It says, pray for each other so that you may be healed. The prayer of a righteous man is powerful and effective. That scripture talks about talking to our people, our friends about God, but also about talking to God about our friends. That's why I've asked you to pray for people. Pray for people over these next 5 weeks, that 3 for 5 challenge of saying, God, please speak into their life. How many of you get an email reminder to remind you to pray? Is that helpful? Yeah. If you haven't got that email reminder and it's something that would help you continue to pray, see me or see Mark after the service, and we'll make sure we add you to that list to help you to remember to pray for your friends. Because you see, Jesus talked to God about his friends. Often he prayed for people. Do you know there's a prayer in here where Jesus prayed that he's praying for you and me, and we didn't even exist yet, but he knew we were coming? Because he's the one that created everything. So we need to talk to God about our friends and talk to our friends about God. Have you ever thought that to pray to have friends who don't know Jesus Christ and then to pray for them to come to know Christ? Y'all, I pray every day. It hit me about 4 years ago that everybody I was hanging out with were Christians. And I love Christians. I love them to death. But that's not who God called me to reach. God, I began to pray, Lord, give me friends who aren't Christian. I know you know people that aren't Christian. Do you pray that you have more of them come into your life? And then do you pray that they see Christ through you? So talk to God about your friends. Ask him to open up your eyes to see those people that they are. Here's another thing you need to do to increase the potency of your faith, is to show your faith by your actions. You know, because here's the truth, and you know it, you've seen it, you probably have experienced it yourself. There's a world out there watching you. The thing about it is, they are turned off when they see our words not match our actions. So we need to make sure that our actions match our words and show our faith by our actions in all circumstances. In other words, you might just call this being authentic, being real, being a part of who you are. Because the truth is, what's in here is going to come out in your life. Right? I mean, ultimately it's going to come out. You can only fake it so long. And then you're going to quit faking. You know, there's the whole thing of fake it until you make it. Well, it don't work. You know, you got to, what's inside of here will come out. So show your faith by your actions. Be highly potent. People need to see that played out in your life. I struggle with this. Believe it or not, I struggle with that. I struggle with people giving me a compliment. Steve Rowan called me out on that last week. He said, Kenny, you just got a hard time accepting it when people say something nice about you. You always say, well, you know, God did it all, God did it all. But you know, the truth is, God works through people. But sometimes we think we're trying to be humble, and what we end up doing is hiding our faith instead of showing it in our actions. Our faith becomes contagious when it's lived out in our life. Here's another thing, and these last two are kind of related together. To be highly potent, you have to be open and honest with people. Open and honest. Here's our theme verse for this whole thing. 1 Peter 3:15. Listen to this. But in your hearts set apart Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you for the reason, to give the reason for the hope that you have. But do this with gentleness and respect. Do you have a hope in your life? Do you know the reason for that hope that you have? Are you willing to tell people about that when they ask? Because here's one of the things I've discovered, and you'll discover quickly if you do this. This is one of those dangerous prayers. If you will say to God, God, I want to follow you. I want to be obedient. I want to be a contagious person. If you'll put somebody in my life today that I can share my faith with, you better mean it. Because he will. Immediately. And you'll have that opportunity. And you have to be open and honest with those people. They need to see your struggles. They need to see your triumphs. They need to know when you do well and know when those times aren't going so well. Because then they know you're real. And the thing that we mess up so often, especially as people in the church, and oftentimes we want people to think we're perfect, and we're not perfect. So you need to be open and honest and let them see the struggles. Now, that don't mean go and throw up all your baggage on somebody. You can go too far that way, too. But be honest and be real. You know, one of the greatest reasons that I have such a passion for marriage is because I've messed some marriages greatest reasons that God uses me to help married couples have a better marriage is because I know how to mess up. He broke my heart for marriage. And I have to be open and honest about that. And not like I got it all together, because I don't. Kathy and I do pretty good, but we have struggles too. And we're open and honest about that. You see, here's the difference. Being open and honest is about telling the truth. But this next thing that we're going to go to, the next thing we need to understand if we're going to be highly potent is to be authentic. Open and honest is telling the truth. Authentic is living the truth. Let them see it lived out in your life. Because here's the truth. Your friends have a hypocrisy radar, don't they?
Yeah.
You have a hypocrisy radar, and you can see it coming a mile away. And that radar is running 24/7. One of the oldest quotations, and I don't even remember who said it now, but it's one that DC Talk used in one of their albums years and years and years ago. That's kind of dates myself when I was listening to DC Talk do that music. But there was this quotation from an early evangelist that come back to the turn of the century. He said, the greatest cause of atheism in the world today is people who confess Jesus with their mouth and deny him with their lifestyles. And it's just as true today. So often we say something, we're open and honest, and we talk about our struggles, but then they don't see our life live out those same things that we talk about. We talk about, well, I don't know how I'd get through life if it wasn't for Jesus, and then they see us turn away and not even turn to Christ and turn to every other place except Christ. So we have to be authentic. Not that they expect you to be perfect. Because your friends don't expect you to be perfect. They know you're not going to be perfect. They don't expect you to be holy. Now here's the deal. Now I'm going to put it in one sentence here for you, I think. I hope. There's a world of people out there. If we're to believe this statistic, 60% of our community is a follower of Christ. And it's the greatest message there is. I told the worship band as we were doing our study earlier today, imagine this. These are talented musicians. They could do and play in a lot of different places. But if one person in this room, one person, says, I want to live for Jesus Christ, and they accept Jesus as their Lord and Savior, and they say, I want to follow him, and their life is changed for eternity, that's more important than playing in front of 100,000 people. Because there's a world out there that needs to know. There's a world out there that's looking to you. I don't want you to hear it in just my words. I want you to hear it in some words of some other people. Whether you know it or not, your non-believer friends are looking to you for their faith. Check this out.
Do you know, do you understand that you represent Jesus to me?
Do you understand that when you treat me with gentleness, it raises the question in my mind that maybe he is gentle too. Maybe he isn't someone who laughs when I am hurt.
Do you understand that when you listen to my questions and you don't laugh, that I think, what if Jesus is interested in me too? Do you understand that when I hear you talk honestly about the argument, conflict, and scars from your past, that I think maybe I'm just a regular person instead of a bad, no good little girl who deserves abuse?
If you care, then I think that maybe he cares. And then there's this flame of hope that burns inside of me that I'm afraid to breathe because it might go out.
Do you know? Do you understand that your words are his words? That your face is his face to someone like me? Please be who you say you are. Please, God, let us be on the trip. Please let this be real this time. Please.
Do you know? Do you understand? You represent Jesus to me.
You represent Jesus to those people out there. And they're looking to you. The greatest message that there is. I don't want you to feel like that weighs you down. I want you to see that the